Welcome to another class on the introduction to sociology. We are moving on, and I just want us to take in the study because the study is meant to make you rounded. The servant of God must be rounded. The servant of God will not do well in this world if he's not rounded. Has to be rounded. Okay, now let us pray. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for goodness and grace toward us. I commit this class to you, the participants, myself, and the system now engaged to make this class possible. Ask your guidance and your blessing, your leadership. In the precious name I pray, amen. Now we are picking up where we left off. And we were looking at the distinction between microsociology and macrosociology. And we were looking at some examples of macrosociology. And we're going to look at another example. Other examples of macro level research include examining why women are far less likely than men to reach positions of power in society, or why fundamentalist Christian religious movements play a more prominent role in American politics than they do in Canadian politics. It is a fact that women play or less likely, let me not say play, they are less likely to reach positions of power, top positions. They may become vice presidents and so on. But you don't find many of them. Occasionally find a female political leader like prime minister. I know of one female queen in the world. I don't know if, I'm not saying there aren't others, but Queen Elizabeth of England or the United Kingdom. All right, and we have the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is a female at present, but not many. When you put the few, I don't think you have 6 female Prime Ministers at present. So that point is taken. But the question is why? And even in institutions, you tend to find that most big companies and institutions are headed by men. So the question is why? And fundamentalist Christian religious movements play a more prominent role in American politics than they do in Canadian politics. In each case, the site of the analysis shifts away from the nuances and nuances, N-U-A-N, N-U-A-N-C-E-S. You can look it up. The nuances and detail of micro level in interpersonal life to the broader macro level systematic patterns that structure social change and social cohesion in society. So micro sociology is concerned with more details, right? Smaller points, the details in interpersonal life and relationships. Macro sociology moves away from such minute details and nuances to a broader level, and they tend to focus on macro level systematic patterns that structure social change and social cohesion. What are they? Societies are held together. You know, the societies don't really break up. They stagnate and don't produce much and so on, but they don't really break up. The relationship between the micro and the macro remains one of the key problems confronting sociology. The relationship between the two. The German sociologist George Simmel pointed out that macro level processes are in fact nothing more than the sum of all the unique interactions between specific individuals at any one time. Yet they have properties of their own which would be missed if sociologists only focus on the interactions of specific individuals. So, according to George, macro level processes are in fact nothing more than the sum of all the unique interactions. And yet, if you focus on just a few specific individuals, there are certain properties that you're going to miss. In other words, well, there is a need for both. There is a need for both. Emil Durkheim's classic study where my classic study of suicide is a case in point. Study of suicide can be macro. I'm talking about a specific instance or instances. While suicide is one of the most personal, individual, and intimate acts imaginable, Durkheim demonstrated that rates of suicide differed between religious communities, Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. So, is the point? Is it that the point is being made that he viewed it from a macro perspective because he's not dealing with it? Although he's dealing with suicide, he's dealing with suicide from groups' perspectives, not just individual perspectives. Yes, suicide is personal and individual and intimate, but he's viewing it from the perspectives of groups, Protestants, Catholic, Jews, in a way that could not be explained by the individual factors involved in each specific case. Yet you have to study the individual factors in each case to come to that. You can't separate them. You don't have 50 Protestants or Catholic or Jews committing suicide at one time. The different rates of suicide had to be explained by macro level variables associated with the different religious beliefs and practices of the faith communities. I knew that he was making a point that Durkheim studied suicide, yet from a macro level. Even though suicide is personal and individual. We will return to this example in more detail later. On the other hand, macro level phenomena like class structures, institutional organizations, legal systems, gender stereotypes, and urban ways of life provide a shared context for everyday life, but do not explain its nuances and micro variations very well. When you view these institutions from, or you do your macro level analysis of these institutions, you don't get, you miss out on the micro variations. you miss out on the nuances and micro variations that affect them, that are also a part of the complexity. Macro level structures constrain the daily interactions of the intimate circles in which we move. But they are also filtered through localized perceptions and lived in a myriad of inventive and unpredictable ways. So there's a need for both. I wouldn't separate them. There's a need for both. There's a need to approach it from both perspective or levels, both levels. I don't want to lose you as a student or as students. We are we have been looking at macrosociology and microsociology. Microsociology deals with social interactions on a minute level. It takes in more details. Whereas macrosociology approaches these social phenomena at another level that don't include the nuances and details that are included at the micro level. I'm going slowly. I don't want to look. You see, and if you can't get this, it means that, because let me tell you, as scholars, as students and budding scholars, you should be able to relate to every field. Don't lock yourself into just preaching Bible. How will you reach a sociologist who uses scientific methodology to study human social relations and study societies and institutions and people, how they affect one another? How they affect one another. We'll come back to that. We're going to come back to that, how institutions affect people and people affect them. We're going to be looking at the sociological imagination. Although the scale of sociological studies and the methods of carrying them out are different, or they differ, the sociologists involved in them all have something in common. Each of them looks at society using what pioneer sociologist C. Wright Mills called the sociological imagination. I read it again. Although the scale of sociological studies and the methods of carrying them out differ from one another, sociologists involved in them, carrying them out, being these analyses, all have something in common. They have a particular thing in common. Each of them looks at society using what pioneer sociologist C. Wright Mills called the sociological imagination. All of them use that. Sometimes also referred to as the sociological lens or sociological perspective. I've been using the term in perspective so far. Sociological lens or sociological perspective. Lens, like my glasses. One is a lens, but two lenses. So if you're, as a historian, I'm looking at the phenomenon through a historical lens. As a theologian, I'm looking at the same phenomenon through a theological lens, and therefore you're going to see differences on each occasion. So all sociologists employ the same lens or perspective known as sociological imagination. Hold on to that. In a sense, this was Mill's way of addressing the dilemmas of the macro-micro divide in sociology. The divide took place because persons, sociologists, opted for different approaches. The macros sociologists who opted for the macro approach is going to justify his approach, give reasons why he has selected that approach, and vice versa. But I'm saying there should be a meshing of both approaches because both of them are dealing with, they're involved in the same process, only that they are approaching that thing, that they take a different approach to analyzing social phenomena. Different approach. But it should mean that their approaches are in conflict with one another. They all serve to unearth important information, to furnish us with important information. In a sense, Mills defined sociological imagination as how individuals understand their own and others' pasts in relation to history and social structure. It is a capacity to see an individual's private troubles in the context of the broader social processes that structure them. And that is the meshing. You're looking at the individual's private troubles, that would be microsociology, and you're looking at the context of the broader social processes that structure them. That's really macrosociology. And that's what I'm saying. There should be a meshing, not conflict between the two approaches. This enables the sociologists to examine what Mills called personal troubles of milieu environment as public issues of social structure and vice versa. So sociological imagination. All sociologists have that. Their approaches in analyzing these phenomena differ, but shouldn't conflict. Shouldn't cause any conflict. Shouldn't cause any conflict. Mills reasoned that private troubles like being overweight, being unemployed, having marital difficulties, or feeling purposeless or depressed can be purely personal in nature. Microsociology. It is possible for them to be addressed and understood in terms of personal, psychological, or moral attributes, either one's own or those of the people in one's immediate milieu. In an individualistic society like our own, this is in fact the most likely way that people will regard the issues they confront. I have an addictive personality. I can't get a break in the job market. My husband is unsupportive. And it goes on. These are individual, these are micro matters. are microsociological matters. However, if private troubles are widely shared with others, they indicate that there is a common social problem that has its source in the way social life is structured. At this level, the issues are not adequately understood as simply private troubles. They are best addressed as public issues that require a collective response to resolve. At this level, however, if private troubles are widely shared with others, I mean, you're not alone, they indicate that there is a common social problem. You're looking at the macro level now. A common social problem that has its source in the way of life, in the way social life is structured. So you're looking at society now. There are factors in society that cause that. That cause people to go to university, leave university, or a training institution, you're qualified, whatever, and cannot get a job. Recently I heard, I'm not sure if it is Jamaica or some other country, but the decision was taken to drop the requirement of experience when young people, qualified young people, come to get a job. That requirement has been dropped. I'm not sure which country, but I've heard it. So you have to look at here are young people who are qualified and they cannot work. They cannot get a job. Here's this young man, he can't get a job. Why? They require experience, a year, 2 years, and he has just left university. So therefore, is the macro sociological factors affecting him are caused by macro structures, are structures at the macro level in society, or the society in which he lives. So therefore, to help him, and he would not be the only one, decisions would have to be made by the authorities at the macro level to eliminate certain structures in order to address his micro situation, are the micro factors affecting him or her or them. So I trust that you are getting you're getting the picture now. I want you to get it. I don't want to lose you. Private troubles, which are macro matters, are often caused by macro structures in the society. It might not be, because if a person is not qualified, he didn't go to school. Either he refused to go, or he didn't have the ability to learn, or his parents did not send him. But the fact is, he doesn't have an education. He's not qualified to get a job in a bank. You can't blame society for that. So, at this level, the issues are not adequately understood as simply private troubles. They are best addressed as public issues that require a collective response to resolve. Obesity, for example, has been increasingly recognized as a growing problem for both children and adults in North America. Michael Pollan cites statistics that 3 out of 5 Americans are overweight and 1 out of 5 is obese, overweight and obese. Obesity is extreme. In Canada, 2012, just under 1 in 5 adults were obese, or from 16% of men and 14.5% of women. I have to make note of something here. I'm going to write something here. Um, just a minute. In Canada, in 2012, just under 1 in 5 adults were I write this down because I'm going to check it out. It's a grammar I'm looking at, not the information. Sorry. It says in Canada, just 1 in 5 adults. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the subject here is one. But it said 1 in 5 adults were obese. As far as I'm concerned, it would be 1 in 5 adults was obese. I'm going to check it out with other grammarians. And that's why I wrote it down. Obesity, therefore, obesity is therefore not simply a private trouble concerning the medical issues, dietary practices, or exercise habits of specific individuals. Because it is on such a scale that it is now a societal issue. So obesity, therefore, not simply a private trouble concerning the medical issues, dietary practices, or exercise habits of specific individuals. It is a widely shared social issue that puts people at risk for chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. It also creates significant social costs for the medical system. Macro process here, Microsociology is involved here. Medical system. Poland argues that obesity is in part a product of the increasingly sedentary and stressful lifestyle of modern capitalist society, but more importantly, it is a product of the industrialization of the food chain, which since the 1970s has produced increasingly cheap and abundant food with significantly more calories due to processing. And I would say additives, well, it's here now. Additives like corn syrup, which which are much cheaper to produce than natural sugars, led to the trend of super-sized fast foods and soft drinks in the 1980s. As Poland argues, trying to find a processed food in the supermarket without a cheap, calorie-rich corn-based additive is a challenge. So the corn syrup is not healthy. The sociological imagination in this example is the capacity to see the private troubles and attitudes associated with being overweight as an issue of our industrialization. I read it again. The sociological imagination in this example is the capacity to see the private troubles, that's macrosociology, and attitudes associated with being overweight as an issue of how the industrialization of the food chain has altered the human environment relationship. Macro now, it's macro sociology. In particular, with respect to the types of food we eat and the way we eat them. I'm glad that I belong to a school of thought that holds that the two schools should be merged or should work together. By looking at individuals and societies and how they interact through this lens, that is sociological imagination, sociologists are able to examine what influences behavior, attitudes, and culture. Culture would be at the macro level. By applying systematic and scientific methods to this process, they try to do so without letting their own biases and preconceived ideas influence their conclusions. So they're doing it objectively. I wanted to do your reflection and email me. God bless you.